Hare Krishna, and welcome to another lecture from Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm currently in Budapest Temple, so yeah, it's very nice here. It's one of the most beautiful temples in Europe. It's very clean and it has beautiful deities of Shishi Nitai, so maybe if sometimes you visit, it's nice to see. So we are continuing to talk about Lord Nityananda. Last time we spoke many things, and from the beginning of the chapter we concluded that actually Lord Balaram is actually Lord Nityananda is not different from Lord Balaram. And to prove this claim, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is quoting Shastras where he explains who actually Balaram is, and then conclude that this Balaram is not different from Lord Nityananda. And it will be described in Chaitanya Charitamrita in many places how the energy of Lord Balaram is actually responsible for sustaining the spiritual worlds and the material worlds. And throughout this chapter, it was described how Lord Balaram is sustaining through his energies the spiritual world, and the spiritual world was described. Now we are at the part which describes material world. It describes the Purushas, which are responsible for the maintenance of this material world, also creation, and also in a way destruction. So that's what we were discussing in our last lectures. I think there were 3 lectures on this topic, and this is the 4th one. And we stopped at the text 73. And I will just start. I will not repeat myself. If someone is interested to know what happened in this chapter, you can see our lectures on our YouTube channel, or just stroll on the wall of our Facebook page. So text 73. A part of a whole is called the kala. Shri Balaram is the counter form of Lord Govinda. So we explained throughout this chapter how the first expansion of Lord Krishna is Lord Balaram, and that there is actually no difference between them except in their form. Lord Krishna is blackish, and Lord Balaram is whitish. So that's according to the scriptures, like only difference. Of course, there are more if we go deeper into the topic. But the point when this is stated is that Lord Balaram is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he has all the potencies as Krishna himself. Text 74. Balaram's own expansion is called Mahasankarshana, and his fragment, the Purusha, is counted as a kala, or a part of a plenary portion. So we have been discussing how Lord Balaram serves Krishna in many ways, and he takes upon various forms in which he serves Krishna. So one of these forms is Mahasankarshana, and from this Mahasankarshana the Purushas expand, and they are the ones who are responsible for the creation of the material world. Text 75. I say that this Kala is Mahavishnu. He is the Mahapurusha, who is the source of the other Purushas, and who is all-pervading. So what is here described, and actually repeated what we already spoke about in the previous verses, is that Lord Balarama's expansion of Mahasankarshana, his expansion is called Mahavishnu. And this Mahavishnu is the one who creates the material universes, and who further on expands into other Purushas who create the universe itself, the living entities, and who also enter all the living entities as Supersoul. Text 76. Garbhodakashai and Kshirakashai are both called Purushas. They are plenary portions of Karanutakashai Vishnu, the first Purusha, who is the abode of all universes. So again it is repeated that Karanutakashai Vishnu is actually Mahavishnu, who lies on the causal ocean, and when he exhales, all the material universes come throughout his pores. Then the Lord, in the form of another Purusha, enters as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu into each and every universe, and also starts a creation within the universe. And then he enters, excuse me, I think I'm going to sneeze. He enters in each and every living entity, and even in every atom of that universe. That is Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that the symptoms of the Purusha are described in the Lagu Bhagavatamrita. While describing the incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the author has quoted from the Vishnu Purana, where it is said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto Purushottama, Lord Krishna, who is always free from the contamination of the six material dualities, whose plenary expansion, Mahavishnu, glances over matter to create the cosmic manifestation, who expands himself in various transcendental forms, all of which are one and the same, who is the master of all living entities, who is always free and liberated from the contamination of material energy, and who, when he appears in this material world, seems as one of us, although he has an eternal, spiritual, blissful, transcendental form." In summarizing this statement, Rupa Goswami has concluded that the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who acts in cooperation with the material energy, is called the Purusha. And so these Purushas are actually expansions of Lord Balaram, and therefore they are mentioned here. And they are mentioned also as a proof that Lord Nityananda is not different from Lord Balaram. So when we speak about the personality of Lord Nityananda, so that we can actually understand who he is. We can see that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who is the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, he emphasizes this very much. First, he went to explain who is Lord Chaitanya, then he went to explain why he did appear here, and why did he took the mood of Srimati Radharani, and now he is explaining who is Lord Nityananda. And as he explained that Lord Chaitanya is not different from Lord Krishna, but has taken the mood of Radharani, in the same way he is explaining that Lord Nityananda is not different from Lord Balaram. Text 77. Vishnu has three forms called Purushas. The first, Mahavishnu, is the creator of the total material energy, so we explained that in the previous class. The second is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, who is situated within each universe, and the third is Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, who lives in the heart of every living being. He who knows these three becomes liberated from the clutches of Maya. Text 78. Although Karanakashayi Vishnu is called a Kala of Lord Krishna, and we explained that Kala means a part, like plenary portion of Lord Krishna, he is the source of Matsya, Kurma, and other incarnations. So basically, if you read Srimad Bhagavatam, there are chapters which describe the incarnations of Lord Krishna. And many of them are mentioned and listed there in Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is also said that this list, which is enumerated in Srimad Bhagavatam, is not a final list, because actually Lord Krishna has unlimited expansions. But when these expansions, when they appear or descend, when they appear, I will take that word. When they appear in this material world, they come as a manifestation of Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. And Kshirodakashayi Vishnu is actually the super soul, and he's situated in the heart of every living entity. And his other function is that actually he's the source of all the incarnations in the material world. And therefore an example is given in this verse, that these incarnations are, for example, Matsya, Kurma, and others. Text 79. All these incarnations of Godhead are either plenary portions or parts of the plenary portions of the Purusha avatars. But Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. In every age, he protects the world through his different features when the world is disturbed by the enemies of Indra. So this verse is actually very important in establishing the theology of Krishna consciousness or theology of Bhakti Yoga, because we as followers or as practitioners of Bhakti Yoga, we say that Lord, that the original source of everything, the cause of all causes from which everything comes from, is actually Lord Krishna. And this is confirmed in this verse that I read right now. And this verse actually is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam. And it says that even though all these expansions and incarnations or empowered personalities, even though they are incarnations of Krishna, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're just all his plenary portions. So this verse actually confirms who is the origin of everything, who is God actually, who is the original God from whom everything came. Text 580. That Purusha, Karanodakasha Vishnu, is the performer of creation, maintenance, and destruction. He manifests himself in many incarnations, for he is the maintainer of the world. Text 81. That fragment of the Supreme Lord, known as the Mahapurusha, appears for the purpose of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, and it's called an incarnation. So this is just a more detailed explanation actually of the Purushas and what are their functions and what is their source. Text 82. That Mahapurusha is identical with the personality of Godhead. He is the original incarnation, the seed of all others, and the shelter of everything. Next verse. The Purusha, Mahavishnu, is the primary incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Time, nature, prakriti, as cause and effect, the mind, the material elements, false ego, the modes of nature, the senses, the universal form, complete independence, and the moving and non-moving beings appear subsequently as his opulences. So basically, opulences of Mahavishnu, who is the cause of creation, maintenance, and destruction, are all the elements that we can actually find in this material world. And they're all creations from him, and he uses them. He actually, I'm just looking for an English word. He connects them together and makes them alive by his own glance. And that's how actually the whole creation takes place. And this Purusha, as it is described here, is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then to conclude then that if he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and these Purushas are actually Lord Balaram, then Lord Balaram is also considered as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which we know from the scripture. And then again, the conclusion is that this Lord Balaram is not different from Lord Nityananda, so that we understand who Lord Nityananda is. Text 84. In the beginning of the creation, the Lord expanded himself in the form of the Purusha incarnation, accompanied by all the ingredients of material creation. First, he created the 16 principal energies suitable for creation. This was for the purpose of manifesting the material universes. So, this is a little bit about how Mahavishnu starts the creation, what is happening actually. And all these can be found in details in the 2nd and 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where, throughout each canto, actually even the further ones until the canto 5, they all contain descriptions which are like more detailed or more deeper descriptions of how actually the creation takes place. But here is just in short explained that he manifests all the ingredients by which he then creates the material world. Text 85. Although the Lord is the shelter of everything, and although all the universes rest in him, he, as the super soul, is also the support of everything. So this is the inconceivable potency of the Lord, that He is the shelter of everything, and He, even though all the universes rest in Him, He is also in everything. So that's kind of contradictory, but that is the inconceivable potency that only God has. And the scriptures explain it like this. This is only one example of how these contradictions are manifested in the Lord. Text 86. Although he is thus connected with the material energy in two ways, he does not have the slightest contact with it. So this actually means that Lord Krishna is transcendental to the material world, and all his Purushas are also transcendental and have nothing to do, even though they create and are in the material creation as their sustainers in a way. They are not touched by material nature, and they are not under the influence of the mode of material nature. So Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that in the Lagu Bhagavatamrita, Srila Rupa Goswami, commenting upon the Lord's transcendental position beyond the material qualities, says that Vishnu, as the controller and superintendent of material nature, has a connection with the material qualities. That connection is called yoga. However, the person who directs a prison is not also a prisoner. Similarly, although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, directs and supervises the qualitative nature, he has no connection with the material modes of nature. The expansions of Lord Vishnu always retain their supremacy. They are never connected with the material qualities. One may argue that Mahavishnu cannot have any connection with the material qualities, because if he were so connected, Srimad Bhagavatam would not state that material nature, ashamed of her thankless task of acting to induce the living entities to become averse to the Supreme Lord, remains behind the Lord in shyness. So this is just a description of a sweet description actually of how material energy works in the service of Krishna. And then Srila Prabhupada explains that in answer to this argument, it may be said that the word guna means regulation. Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma, and Lord Shiva are situated within this universe as the directors of the three modes, and their connection with the modes is known as yoga. This does not indicate, however, that these personalities are bound by the qualities of nature. Lord Vishnu specifically is always the controller of the three qualities. There is no question of his coming under their control. So to repeat a little bit, for those who don't know, Lord Vishnu, he comes into the material universes as a maintainer. So that is his function there as a Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Brahma is the creator of this material world, and he's in charge of the creation. And Lord Shiva is in charge of the destruction of these material universes. So these are like the three, in a way, masters of the material universe, but higher than Brahma and Shiva is Lord Vishnu, because he's transcendental and he's never under the influences of the modes of material nature. Although the causal and element supplying features exist in material nature by dint of the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord is never affected by glancing over the material qualities. By the will of the Supreme Lord, the different qualitative changes in the material world take place, but there is no possibility of material affection, change, or contamination from Lord Vishnu. So all these descriptions are given to us so that we can understand that the position of the Lord is a little bit different than the position of ordinary living beings. So whenever the Lord comes into this world and whatever functions he performs in the material world, he's always transcendental to the energies that are here. He's never under their influence, because he's their creator and maintainer and the destructor. Text 87. This is the opulence of the Lord. Although situated within the material nature, he is never affected by the modes of nature. Similarly, those who have surrendered to him and have fixed their intelligence upon him are not influenced by the modes of nature. So, in a way, what it is described here is like the person who practices Bhakti Yoga and the person who is in Krishna consciousness, he is also transcendental to the modes of material nature. So he in a way gets all the qualities of the Lord, in the sense that he's not touched by the influence of the material world. And this also is indication for us that if we practice Bhakti Yoga by chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, if we read the scriptures, if we associate with like-minded people who are also interested in this path of spirituality, especially Bhakti Yoga, we also can actually achieve this state and be protected by the divine energy, because the divine energy comes from the Lord and it is transcendental and has nothing to do with this material world. Text 88. Thus the Bhagavad Gita also states again and again that the Absolute Truth always possesses inconceivable power. So this inconceivable power is something that will be mentioned throughout the scriptures. Sometimes we say that if we cannot explain something about the Lord because it's totally contradictory and we cannot understand it and it's not something that is in the scope of our experience, then we say that it is actually the inconceivable power of the Lord. And we gave one example while reading these verses, and that is that everything that exists rests in the Lord, but at the same time, the Lord is in everything. So how can something rest in something and then that something be in everything? So it's a contradiction from the logical point of view and logical perspective. And these are like some of the philosophical points that can be found in the scriptures that are dealing with Bhakti Yoga. But anyway, this is like a characteristic of the Lord, that he has these inconceivable potencies. But when we go through the stories, when we go through the Lilas of the Lord, then we can actually understand these inconceivable potencies, and they're not so much inconceivable anymore, because by practicing Bhakti Yoga and by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, the Lord reveals himself to the devotee. He gives intelligence to the devotee so that he or she can understand who is the Lord, what are his qualities, and everything about his personality. So then he gives us the intelligence that we can in some way understand him, and that we can in some way understand the scriptures and the descriptions of the scriptures. So text 89. Lord Krishna said, I am situated in the material world, and the world rests in me, just like we explained now. But at the same time, I am not situated in the material world, nor does it rest in me in truth. So this is a contradiction which can be explained only as an inconceivable power of the Lord. Like, how is that possible? What is described in the scriptures is that, as we said, who is the original personality of Godhead? Who is the original Lord, the original incarnation, who is the cause of all causes, of whom everything emanated and is created? We said that that is Lord Krishna. And it is actually true that the Lord has nothing to do with this material world, because he's situated in the spiritual world. He is situated on the highest planet of the spiritual world, which is called Krishna Loka, and he is enjoying his pastimes there. And he's, in a way, let's say it like that, not aware what is happening. But that is true and that is not true. And this contradiction can only be possible for the Lord, because he's supremely conscious. So in a way, he can be absorbed in his Lilas at the highest planet in the material world, but at the same time, he can be present with the individual in the material worlds, because he's situated in everyone's heart as the super soul. So he's there, but he's not there. Even though it is described in some places in the scriptures how the devotees, they cannot accept that the Lord is aloof from the material world if they are there, because they always think that he's with them in their hearts, and that is true, because as soon as the person turns to the Lord automatically reciprocates, and this relationship is established, and the person gets guidance from the heart, and then through practicing spiritual life, he or she actually understands that the Lord is situated in his heart, and that he's very close to him, and that actually the same Lord who is situated in Krishna Loka, who is playing his flute and who is performing the Lilas with the gopis or with the cowherd boys or with his mother and father, that same personality is actually right here, situated in the heart of the devotee. So that's also an inconceivable potency of the Lord, and it's realized by the great and pure devotees. So let's go to the next verse. Next verse is text 590 of Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila. O Arjuna, you should know this of my inconceivable opulence. This is the meaning propagated by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So this is just a confirmation where Krishna actually talks about how he has inconceivable potencies, and that is in the Bhagavad Gita, where he explains himself. He stands in front of Arjuna and he tries to tell him what is his duty. He tries to tell him, just surrender unto me and reject all other religions. Just have faith. I will protect you. And until the point where he comes and states that in front of Arjuna, he also explains who he is, who Arjuna is, that he is actually the spirit soul, and what is his duty in this world to act in Krishna consciousness, in consciousness of the Lord. And he also gives hints of who he is. He speaks about his opulences and how he is manifested, and he also talks about this material world and how the energies of the material world function. So he explains everything in the Bhagavad Gita, and since the Bhagavad Gita is a scripture which is spoken by Lord himself personally, therefore it is given here as an evidence of the fact that the Lord has inconceivable potencies. So when you study Chaitanya Charitamrita, especially the beginnings, when the truth about incarnations of the Lord is explained, it is very philosophical. So that's why I also explain it in this way. Some things can be simplified, but philosophy as such, I don't know, I like it. It's always explained in a way that it's substituted with verses from various scriptures, just to prove that something is truth. It's just like, for instance, when I was practicing law. So if you want to make a claim of something, you have to say which law applies to the situation and give, I don't know how much evidence that what you're stating is truth, so that the judge can then pass a judgment in your favor. So in the same sense, in a way, philosophical scriptures are written like that, that we make a claim and then we give evidence that the claim is truth, that the claim is truthful. So let's continue. Text 91. That Mahapurusha, Karanadakashayi Vishnu, is known as a plenary part of him who is Lord Nityananda Balaram, the favorite associate of Lord Chaitanya. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was explaining throughout 91 verses about Lord Nityananda actually, and who he is, and talking about various expansions and the functions of these expansions, only to conclude in this verse that this is actually Lord Nityananda, that we should be aware who Lord Nityananda is. And then he says, I have thus explained the 9th verse, and now I shall explain the 10th. Please listen with rapt attention. Text 93. I offer my full obeisances unto the feet of Sri Nityananda Rama, who is a partial part of whom is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. From the navel of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu sprouts the lotus, that is birthplace of Brahma, the engineer of universe. The stem of that lotus is the resting place of multitudes of planets. So again, like if we're going to talk about Lord Nityananda, just see who is actually Lord Nityananda. So he's that plenary portion that enters each universe, and he rests on the Garbhodaka ocean, on the Nantashesha, and the goddess Lakshmi is massaging his feet, and through his navel grows a lotus flower on which the first living entity of this material world is born, and that is his secondary creator, Lord Brahma, who is the engineer of the universe. And we all know that Lord Brahma, even though he's considered as the creator of the material universe, he's actually not that. He's just a secondary creator in the sense that he was given a role of a personality who has to meditate to gain power of creation. And then when he gains the power of creation by meditating on the Lord and by pleasing the Lord gives him knowledge of how to create. But he doesn't create in the sense that he now has the power to manifest certain things that were not existing before. What he has is the power to collect all the ingredients the Lord has already created. So if you want to know the details in Srimad Bhagavatam, everything is explained. How the Lord, when he glances over the material nature, he actually creates all the elements. First he creates all the elements, and then with the glance he makes new elements into motion, so that they connect and that they form certain bodies and so on. So what Lord Brahma is doing is like he has many parts, like when we buy toys for our children, like Lego, for example. It has many bricks, I don't know, little dolls that also need to be assimilated, like their hands, their heads, and so on. So in the same sense, something similar like that, even though this is simplified, but something similar like that Lord Brahma is doing. So he's just taking all the parts that Lord Krishna has already created, and he assimilates them together, and therefore he so-called creates. So therefore he's known in the Shastras actually as the secondary creator. But you have to understand that whenever Lord does something, what he likes the most is to make his devotee in a way famous, that he's actually doing a certain thing. So in the same sense, Arjuna, when he was serving the Lord Krishna, even though Lord Krishna already decided what will happen to the parties that were on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, so he already decided that everyone who is there is going to die. So it will be done, whatever Arjuna does. But maybe if he becomes his servant, that's what Krishna was saying, if you become my servant, then you can take credit for all of this, and I actually want to give the credit to you. So in a similar sense, he created everything, but since Lord Brahma is a great devotee of Lord Krishna, he wanted to give him the benefit of creation and to make him famous as the creator of this material world. So that is like one of the qualities of the Lord and of Lord Krishna, that he's not some personality that is very popped up and that everything is about him. Although it is about him, but he always wants to make his devotees shine in his name, in his service. He wants to make them famous. So, and we can see that in many examples throughout the scriptures, but also in the example of Srila Prabhupada. I mean, Srila Prabhupada is definitely a person who was very much authorized by Lord Krishna and empowered by Lord Krishna. And even though it was the desire of the Lord who incarnated as Lord Chaitanya that his name would be propagated in every town and village, he empowered certain personalities and made them famous in the mission of Lord Chaitanya. Okay, so let's go to the next verse. After creating millions of universes, the first Purusha entered into each of them in a separate form as Sri Garbhodakashaya. So again, it just repeats himself, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So he explains, entering the universe, he found only darkness with no place in which to reside. Thus he began to consider. Then he created water from the perspiration of his own body, and with that water filled half of the universe. So this is the description of individual universe. So Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, he enters into the universe, he sees that everything is dark, and then from the pores of his body, he creates water, which is called Garbhodaka ocean, and he lies on it. The universe measures 500 million yojanas. Its length and breadth are one and the same. So we see that in Srimad Bhagavatam we even have the measurement of our universe, which is quite fascinating, at least for me. After filling half of the universe with water, he made his own residence therein and manifested the 14 worlds in the other half. And this might be interesting for some. The 14 worlds are enumerated in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 2nd canto and 5th chapter. The upper planetary systems are Bhu, Bhuvar, Swar, Mahar, Janas, Tapas, and Satya. The 7 lower planetary systems are Tala, Atala, Vitala, Nitala, Talatala, Mahatala, and Sutala. The lower planets as the whole are called Palatala. Among the upper planetary systems, Bhu, Bhuvar, and Swar constitute Svargaloka, and the rest are called Matya. The entire universe is thus known as 3 Loka, like consisting of the 3 planetary systems. 3 means 3, and Loka is a planet. There he manifested Vaikuntha as his own abode and rested in the waters of the bed of Lord Shesha. So in the material world there is one Vaikuntha where Lord Garbhodakashaya Vishnu resides, and this is the place where Lord Krishna comes and offers prayers to the Lord along with demigods when they are in trouble in the material world. And this can be seen and it's mentioned throughout Srimad Bhagavatam. It is further described how he lay there with Ananta as his divine bed. Lord Ananta is a divine serpent having thousands of heads, thousands of faces, thousands of eyes, and thousands of hands and feet. He is the seed of all incarnations and is the cause of the material world. So this Shesha actually is also Lord Balaram, because we said at the beginning of our lectures about Lord Balaram and Nityananda how Lord Balaram is the greatest servant of the Lord, and he serves the Lord in many ways. One of the ways is that he sustains the spiritual and material worlds, and that he acts in the form of certain Purushas to create the material worlds, and also he sustains the spiritual world and the spiritual planets by his energy. But also one other way how he serves the Lord is as his bed, as his umbrella, and as his shoes, and so on. So we see here that this is the incarnation of Sheshanaga, and in a way, Lord Shesha is a bed here of Lord Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, because Lord Garbhodakashaya Vishnu lies on him. So this is also a way Lord Balaram serves his Lord. Okay, the next verse. From his navel grows a lotus flower, which became the birthplace of Lord Brahma. Within the stem of that lotus were the 14 worlds. Thus the Supreme Lord, as Brahma, created the entire creation. So what is interesting also is that the planetary systems of this material world are actually situated in the stem of the lotus flower. So on the top is a lotus where Lord Brahma sits, and there is a stem. Let's say my hand is a stem. So here are the planetary systems, the upper planetary system, the middle one, and the lower one. And that's how we are situated in this universe. And this also you can see, because I've posted on our Facebook page wall some pictures of the spiritual and material worlds, and if you look at these pictures, that can be seen. And as Lord Vishnu, he maintains the entire world. Lord Vishnu, being beyond all material attributes, has no touch with the material qualities. So again, it is very much emphasized how even though the Lord is within the material world as the creator, and he, from his navel Brahma, is born and so on, so he's there, but he is totally aloof from all these energies. Assuming the form of Rudra, he destroys the creation. Thus creation, maintenance, and dissolution are created by his will. So even Lord Rudra or Lord Shiva is in a way, I mean, he's not, there's a whole description actually of who Lord Rudra or Lord Shiva is. And I will not go into details about that because I think it's quite complicated. But what I will do is just read a short commentary of Srila Prabhupada, because he says that Maheshwara or Lord Shiva is not an ordinary living being, nor he is equal to Lord Vishnu. Effectively comparing Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva, the Brahma Samhita says that Vishnu is like milk, whereas Shiva is like yogurt. Yogurt is nothing like milk, but nevertheless it is milk also. So in that same sense, Shiva is Lord Vishnu is not Shiva, but Shiva is in a way Lord Vishnu. So, but there's of course a deeper and more detailed descriptions, but maybe we will come to that one day, but not now. So to come back to Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, further on it is explained how he is the super soul, Hiranyagarbha, the cause of the material world. The universal form is conceived as his expansion. That Lord Narayana is a part of a plenary part of Lord Nityananda Balaram, who is the source of all incarnations. So again, the position of Lord Nityananda is described. And then he says, Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, I have thus explained the 10th verse. Now please listen to the meaning of the 11th verse with all your mind. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the feet of Sri Nityananda Rama, whose secondary part is the Vishnu lying in the ocean of milk. That Kshiradakashaya Vishnu is the super soul of all living entities and the maintainer of all the universes. Sheshanaga is his further super part. So we see that in this readings, we have verses in which Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami says, now I have explained this verse, and now I come to explanation of this verse. So to make it more clear, in one of the verses, and we spoke about it in our last lecture, he was actually explaining the Mahavishnu. These verses that we read so far, he was explaining Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and what he will now try to explain is the Kshiradakashaya Vishnu. So these are all plenary portions and Purushas who are responsible for the creation of this material world. But he goes into more and more details. So he says, the material planets rest within the stem that grows from the lotus navel of Lord Narayana. Among these planets are 7 oceans. There, in the part of the ocean of milk, lies Shvetadvipa, the abode of the sustainer, Lord Vishnu. So again, it is described that there is also a spiritual planet in the material world. So it is described how in Siddhanta Shiromani, an astrological text, the different oceans are described as follows. So these oceans that are described now in this verse as a part of the material world. One of the oceans is the ocean of salt water, then the ocean of milk, then the ocean of yogurt, then the ocean of clarified butter, then the ocean of sugarcane juice, then the ocean of liquor, and the ocean of sweet water. On the southern side of the ocean of salt water is the ocean of milk, where Lord Kshiradakashaya Vishnu resides. He is worshipped there by demigods like Brahma. So in the universe itself, the oceans lie. So that's something that is quite interesting and fascinating. So this Vishnu is the super soul of all living entities. He maintains this material world and he is the Lord. So again, like the explanation in detail. In the ages and millenniums of Manu, he appears as different incarnations to establish the principles of real religion and vanquish the principles of irreligion. So when Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that he incarnates himself millennium after millennium to protect the devotees, to annihilate the demons, and to establish the principles of religion, he's actually talking about this verse as well. And in the incarnation of Lord Krishna, that is the only incarnation of the Lord in which he comes as his original self. So the same Krishna, which is on Krishna Loka, comes into the material world and performs his pastimes there. But other incarnations, they come, as I explained in this lecture a little bit before I started with these verses. I said how the super solar or Kshirodakashaya Vishnu is actually source of all the incarnations, and we read that verse that, for instance, Lord Matsya or Lord Kurma are these kind of incarnations that come from the super soul. So the super soul is the source of it. You can find in more details in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And therefore, this Lord Vishnu, who lies in an ocean of milk, who is actually a Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, he incarnates himself in various forms to maintain the laws of cosmos and annihilate the causes of disturbance. Such incarnations are visible in every Manvantara, which is the course of the rule of each Manu, who lives for a lot of years. 14 of such Manus take their birth and die to yield a place for the next during one day of Brahma. Next verse. Unable to see him, the demigods go to the shore of the ocean of milk and offer prayers to him. So we know that the story of how Lord Krishna appeared in this material world. So the Mother Earth was disturbed by the burden of the demoniac personalities who were living on the earth, and therefore she complained to Lord Brahma and the demigods, and she wanted protection. And therefore the Lord Brahma and the demigods, they approached Lord Vishnu in Shvetadvipa, and they came to the shores of the milk ocean and offered their prayers. And therefore, by offering these prayers, they asked the Lord to incarnate and to protect them in a way, and especially to protect Mother Earth, who also approached the Lord in a form of a cow. Next verse. He then descended to maintain the material world. His unlimited opulences cannot be counted. That Lord Vishnu is but a part of a plenary portion of Lord Nityananda, who is the source of all incarnations. That same Lord Vishnu, in the form of Lord Shesha, holds the planets upon his heads, although he does not know where they are, for he cannot feel their existence upon his heads. So this is again a further description, but from everything that we read so far, we can actually see that Lord Balaram is everything. So in that sense, like, Krishna allows all his energies to function, all his incarnations to do their duties, perform their tasks, but he is the one who plays on Krishna Loka and has nothing to do with this. So basically, from all these descriptions, it can be concluded that everything is basically done by Lord Balaram, because you can see that he's also described as all of these incarnations. He's described as Shesha. He's described as all of these energies. So therefore, we can conclude that basically Lord Balaram is everything, because everything comes from him, and this is the way actually how he serves Krishna. He provides everything for his pastimes. So this Shesha, his thousands of extended hoods are adorned with dazzling jewels surpassing the sun. The universe, which measures 500 million yojanas in diameter, rests on one of his hoods like a mustard seed. So sometimes, like when we read these verses, it can be very confusing. Like first we're talking about Garbhodakashe Vishnu, who lies in one universe, and he lies on Anantashesha. And then we have this verse where it is said like, oh, but then again, here is another Anantashesha. And now, in this description, all the universes lie on his head. Like, how is that possible? So, yeah, this is something that also can be very inconceivable, and something that can be only first accepted from the scriptures, and then through the practice of Bhakti Yoga be realized by mercy of the Lord, because the Lord is the one who gives us intelligence and realizations so that we can actually understand this. But all of these details can be actually found in Srimad Bhagavatam in more clear descriptions of who is who, but it would take too long to go into all these details, so we will just go through this. So that Anantashesha is the devotee incarnation of Godhead, which means Lord Balaram. He knows nothing but service to Lord Krishna. So Lord Balaram knows nothing but the service to Lord Krishna, and that is his main function, and that's how he provides his service, by arranging all these things. It is interesting to read Prabhupada's purport here, where he says that Srila Jiva Goswami in his Krishna Sandarbha, he has described Sheshanaga as follows. Sri Anantadeva has thousands of faces and is fully independent, always ready to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He waits upon him constantly. Sankarsana is the first expansion of Vasudeva, and because he appears by his own will, he is called Swarat, fully independent. He is therefore infinite and transcendental to all limits of time and space. He himself appears as the thousand-headed Shesha. In the Skanda Purana, in the Ayodhya Mahatmya chapter, the demigod Indra requested Lord Shesha, who was standing before him as Lakshmana, "Please go to your eternal abode, Vishnu Loka, where your expansion Shesha, with his serpentine hoods, is also present." After thus dispatching Lakshman to the regions of Palatala, Lord Indra returned to his abode. This quotation indicates that the Sankarsana of the quadruple form descends with Lord Rama as Lakshmana. When Lord Rama disappears, Shesha again separates himself from the personality of Lakshmana. Shesha then returns to his own abode in the Palatala regions, and Lakshmana returns to his abode in Vaikuntha. So this explanation actually indicates that wherever Lord Krishna is, Lord Balaram is also. Because the incarnation of Lord Krishna is, for example, Lord Rama, and Lord Balaram will incarnate there as Lakshman. In the same sense, now, when we talk about Chaitanya Charitamrita, if Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the original personality of Godhead Krishna, who appeared in the mood of Srimati Radharani, when he appears, Lord Nityananda in the form of Balarama also will appear, and which he did, and that's why we're reading this explanation. With his thousands of mouths, he sings the glories of Lord Krishna, but although he always sings in that way, he does not find an end to the qualities of the Lord. The four Kumaras hear Srimad Bhagavatam from his lips, and they in turn repeat it in the transcendental bliss of love of Godhead. He serves Lord Krishna, assuming all the following forms: umbrella, slippers, bedding, pillow, garments, resting chair, residence, sacred thread, and throne. So this is all that we mentioned. He is thus called Lord Shesha, for he has attained the ultimate end of servitude to Krishna. He takes many forms for the service of Krishna, and thus he serves the Lord. That person of whom Lord Ananta is Kala, or part of plenary part, is Lord Nityananda Prabhu, who therefore can know the pastimes of Lord Nityananda. So in a way, it is described here that Lord Nityananda, his personality, and his pastimes are quite inconceivable, because they are not only shown to us through, for example, what will be shown in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when we will hear about the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda. His pastimes are much deeper, because he's a person, and that person is Lord Balaram, and he has a certain service to the Lord. So therefore, all of this is mentioned, just so that we can see that it's not like only this Lila where he's doing something. He's all the time doing so much service for the Lord, because he's simultaneously present in many universes, in many roles, and also in the spiritual world. From these conclusions, we can know the limit of the truth of Lord Nityananda. But what glory is there in calling him Ananta? So this is where Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami just glorifies Lord Nityananda. But I accept it as the truth because it has been said by the devotees. Since he is the source of all incarnations, everything is possible in him. So also, like, to understand the spiritual science, it's very, very important for us to understand from whom do we learn about spiritual science, because Bhakti Yoga is actually spiritual science. So before we come to that position where we can actually hear the Lord in the heart, which means that we are so purified that we actually understand that we are never separated from the Lord, and that, as the Bhagavad Gita describes, and some other Puranas, it is described how in the heart of every living entity there is a soul and a super soul. And the soul, it is metaphorically described, they are situated like two birds on a tree. One bird, which is representing the soul, is eating the fruits of the tree, while the other bird, which represents the super soul, is just watching this bird. And the fruits that this bird, which is a soul, is eating are actually the fruits of his activities, the fruits of its karma. And when that bird finally realizes that there is another bird on that tree and it turns to him, then actually his spiritual life starts. And this super soul gives the guidance. In Bhagavad Gita, it is described how the Lord gives intelligence, he gives guidance, he gives remembrance and everything as a super soul from the heart. So until that moment when we realize that, and when we actually act in knowledge of that the Lord is actually situated in our heart and that we can hear him. And if we can hear him, actually, we can then take guidelines from him. But until we reach that moment, we also need guidance from certain sources, which do not come from our heart, because we have our disturbed mind, we have these circumstances in life that create havoc, and it's not easy to be peaceful, it's not easy to listen to something that we today call intuition, but actually it is the voice of the super soul. So before we come to that platform, we also need guidance, and this guidance is given to us in the scriptures. For example, like this Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Bhagavad Gita, and also from the pure devotees. Now, it is very important to understand that why do we actually accept the authority of the devotees, what they say? Because of their purity. As I said, until we come to the certain stage where we can hear the Lord, we take guidance from the scriptures and the devotees. But these devotees are on that stage, so they are very much connected to the Lord in their heart. So therefore, it is described also in the scriptures that their heart is like it's metaphorically said, like a TV, where they can actually see what is happening in the spiritual world through their meditation. Krishna through the heart reveals everything to them. And usually the devotees are the ones who are confirming the statements of the scriptures. So in that sense, they are the proof of the truth and that the scripture is valid, like it's that what it states is actually a fact. So this is also very important to keep in mind while reading the scriptures about Bhakti Yoga and by listening about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So further on, Kaviraj Goswami explains how these devotees, how can reveal things to us, they know that there is no difference between the incarnations and the source of all incarnations. Previously, Lord Krishna was regarded in the light of different principles by different people. Some said that Krishna was directly Lord Narayana, and some called him Lord Vamanadev, who incarnated. Some called Lord Krishna as an incarnation of Lord Kshirodakashayi, and all these names are true, not truth. Nothing is impossible. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna appears, he is the shelter of all plenary parts. Thus, at that time, all his plenary portions join in him. So what we have here is the description that Krishna is the origin of everything. So he's trying to make a point of that. In whatever form one knows the Lord, one speaks of him in that way. In this there is no falsity, since everything is possible in Krishna. So in the same sense, we were actually reading about it. I tried to describe a little bit about Vaikuntha planets and how there are various forms of the Lord who are worshipped there, and how the inhabitants of Vaikuntha, they do look like Lord Vishnu, but sometimes they take other forms depending on which form they meditated before they came into the spiritual world. So in that sense, this verse can also be seen, that in whatever form one knows the Lord, one speaks of him in that way. So everyone will speak about the Lord according to their realization. And this is also like, this can be seen in the pastime of Krishna, when he was entering the fighting arena to fight Kamsa, and when he was entering there along with his brother Balaram, it was described how the audience saw him. So the impersonalists, they saw him as an effulgent Brahmajyoti. Some ladies saw him as a lover. Vasudev saw him as his son. So everyone saw him in a different way. So this is also how we can, how we have to see the realizations of the devotees, because they give their realizations according to the way they see the Lord. And that is possible because there is so much variety, even in this material world, and what to say of the spiritual world, which is much bigger. Yes, and I just have to see... Therefore, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has exhibited to everyone all the pastimes of all the various incarnations. That's another story. Yeah. And thus Lord Nityananda has unlimited incarnations. In transcendental emotion, he calls himself a servant of Lord Chaitanya. And I have to check how many verses we have in this chapter. Just a second. Because now already time is up and I need to go. Yeah, there are still more verses. So we'll stop here, and yeah, there's no end to glories of Lord Balaram and Lord Nityananda, so we will start again to describe them next Wednesday. Thank you very much for listening, and see you in a week. Hare Krishna.